Hey guys, what's up? This is B coming to you from G&A today. So what I want to do in this video today is I want to talk about the relationship between Walther Arms and Umarex. And specifically the reason I started looking at this relationship is because of these 22 replica firearms that I own. These two H&Ks, this IWI, that Beretta. Of course, none of those are made by H&K, IWI, or Beretta. It's made by Walther / Umarex. And I've known that the entire time I've owned these rifles. And I know that in 1993 that Umarex bought out Walther. And so Umarex owns Walther, but that's the extent of the knowledge that I had about this. Okay, so Walther Arms began in 1886. That's 1886. And it was made by the originator, Karl Walther. That's the person's name who is stamped on this rifle and on several of these rifles. His original factory was in Zella-Mehlis. So when the company was started, they began by manufacturing hunting and target rifles. It was in the early 1900s whenever they began to make pistols. In 1929, they began to make the Walther PP models. And then in 1931, they began to make the PPK models. Both of those were manufactured in 22 LR, 32 ACP, 380 ACP, and some of them were in 25 ACP. Now, the original factory that was built back in the 1800s was destroyed in World War II. Obviously, this is in Germany. In 1953, Fritz Walther built a new factory in Ulm, Germany, and began production of Walther pistols again, and making, like, for instance, the P38. And Walther Arms is still located today in that same town of Ulm, Germany. That's where Walther is currently building their pistols today. Now, Umarex is a completely separate company from Walther. Umarex began in 1972. Before 1972, the company Umarex was still being called by the name of Mayer and Riem. Now, the way Umarex became a big company is in 1972, Germany began to require a permit for you to purchase a lethal weapon. So it became very difficult to buy just real firearms. So what Umarex started to do is they began to develop and begin to make a blank firing pistol known as the Perfecta Model G1. And that's all they made at first. Well, you have all these people who want to be shooting, and so they've got to find some outlet for that. And they can go and buy these blank firing firearms over the counter, and Umarex began to sell lots of those firearms. Then Umarex was the first one to really start in mass production and mass distribution of airsoft type rifles and air rifles, which, as you look at the market today and look at how much money is spent on airsoft and paintball, Umarex was really one of the first companies to start doing that on a mass scale. And that's how Umarex became the large company that it is today, so that it could buy out Walther. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, Umarex bought out Walther in 1993. And so Umarex owns Walther. And so Umarex can do whatever it wants to with Walther's name. Now, whenever Umarex bought out Walther, it didn't just destroy that name and just name everything Umarex. For instance, whenever you see banks today, a lot of times whenever a bigger bank buys out a smaller bank, the name on that smaller bank is gone and you never hear that name again. Well, that certainly wasn't to Umarex's advantage. And that's one reason why they bought Walther, is they were buying the name of a respected firearms maker. And so if you're buying the name, and so they own the name. They own Walther, even to the point of putting Walther's name on some firearms that Umarex build themselves. All right, so that brings us to these rifles right here, and I've got 4 of these rifles, and actually I have the Colt M4, which is going to fit into the exact same type of situation as these 4 do. I just haven't got it yet. I know Umarex owns Walther, but how does that play into who actually makes these rifles? Okay, so now on the H&K 416, and all of these are licensed by H&K, IWI, and Beretta. So Walther / Umarex is using these names by permission, so they can make these rifles look exactly like the original one. But on the 416, you can see right here, it says that this is made by Karl Walther in Germany. And it says that the U.S. importer is Walther Arms of Fort Smith, Arkansas. Okay, on my IWI 22 LR Uzi, you can see right here it says that the U.S. importer is Umarex, but it shows right there that it is made by Karl Walther in Germany. Okay, the H&K G36 shows that it's made by Karl Walther and that the U.S. importer is Walther Arms of Fort Smith, Arkansas. Now the Beretta ARX 160 is the only one that says this. It says right here it's made in Germany by Umarex. Now there are several strange things about the made by Karl Walther or Umarex for these rifles. Now these two rifles right here, first of all, this one says it's made by Karl Walther, this one says it's made by Umarex. But as you look at these two rifles, and I'm not going to take them apart or anything, I've got videos showing that, but if you take these apart, there are a lot of parts that are identical from this rifle to this rifle. The bolt assembly is the same, the trigger mechanism assembly is the same, they have the same barrel, they have the same lockup system for the barrel. There's just, whenever you hold these two, you can tell they are made by the same people. They are just so similar. But this one says it's made by Karl Walther, and that one says it's made by Umarex. Okay, this 416 and the Colt M422 that I'm going to be getting in both say they're made by Karl Walther on the actual rifle. But whenever you start looking at the individual parts of these rifles, they actually use airsoft spec parts. For instance, if you were to look at the actual barrel on this rifle, the inner barrel on this rifle is incredibly thin, and it looks very similar to the inner barrel of an airsoft rifle. Okay, and on the Colt M4, and I'm pretty sure it's the same thing on this 416, but I know on the Colt M4, the threads on the upper receiver use airsoft threads. So if you want to replace the handguard on your Colt M4, you have to just get an airsoft handguard, and those threads will work perfectly on there. The receiver extension or buffer tube on both of these rifles, the 416 and the Colt M4, are very small. They're smaller than mil-spec, and they actually use airsoft spec buttstock diameter. Now I've known all of that about these rifles, but the next step in knowing about this relationship between Walther and Umarex is by looking at proof marks. And I'll tell you, I learned a lot about what I've found out about this through waltherforums.com. And I'll put a link in the description, or a couple of links to a few of the threads that help me to understand more about this. But that's really where I learned a lot about these proof marks. Now, of course, these are German rifles made in Germany. Whether Walther makes them or Umarex makes them, or even if H&K made them, they would be made in Germany. So we're going to be looking at German proof marks as we look at all four of these rifles. All right, so let's start off by looking at the 416-22's proof marks. So there are four separate symbols. Of course, underneath there's the serial number, but there are four different proofs here. The DE is just short for Deutsch or Deutschland, so this just means this was made in Germany, or proofed in Germany anyways. Okay, the next one is the eagle over N. Okay, and here's a document that I found linked to in these Walther forums that shows about German proof marks. And if you look at the eagle over N, that proof mark's been happening since 1952. It is the definitive nitro proof for all guns. So nitro proof just basically means that it's been test fired. Nitro is the type of powder that's not black powder. It's the new smokeless powder, or what then was new. Of course, we've been using smokeless powder for 100 years now or more. But that's all nitro means, is it's just an old term for smokeless powder. It just means that it's been test fired, basically. All right, so the eagle over N means nitro proofed. Now that next proof mark is the one that's really going to make the difference, and we'll come back to that in just a second. This last proof mark is Walther's system for dating this rifle. A is 0, B is 1, C is 2, D is 3. So this BD is 1, 3. So that means that this rifle was made in 2013. I also want to talk about this real quick. Going back to this nitro proof, this eagle over N, okay, on the Uzi, you can see it's BC, which means 12, and it has the eagle over N. Okay, on the Beretta ARX 160, you can see the date on this BD is 13. It has the eagle over N as its nitro proof. But then the G36K, which is the newest Walther rifle out, and my newest one is BE, So this was made in 2014. You can see it does not have the eagle over N. It has CIP over N. The CIP over N is the same proof mark as the eagle over N. It's just the new way that they are marking eagle over N. This is kind of an EU thing where they are standardizing the proofing. And so there's not the eagle over N anymore. It's just CIP over N. Now back to the 416. Let's get to this third proof mark right here, which is really the key to what's going on, or pretty close to being the key. You can see right there that proof mark is what it is it's actually a shield with 3 crowns in it. And if you were paying attention on all the other ones, you would have seen that they all have the same proof mark. As you look at what these proof marks mean, you can see right here the shield with 3 crowns means it's made in Cologne, or I've seen a lot of places just spell it as Cologne. But the 3 crowns in a shield is Cologne. The other Walther proof that you'll see is this stag horn, or these antlers, and that shows Ulm. Now, as I said earlier in the video, Walther is in Ulm, Germany. Okay, this proof mark of 3 crowns in a shield is at Cologne, which is a very short distance to Arnsberg, Germany. And Arnsberg is where Umarex has one of their main manufacturing facilities. And these two places are not real close. There was a guy on one of those Walther forums who lived he said he lived 10 miles from the Walther factory in Ulm, and he was raised there, and he said it's about a 5.5 hour drive from Cologne to Ulm. So they're not just real close to each other. They're a good distance apart. Now, what I didn't understand is these are the actual proof house marks. And what happens is, like, say for instance, when Walther builds a firearm, they don't take these firearms to this proof house at Ulm. A government employee from the proof house in Ulm goes to the Walther factory and goes and puts the firearm into the bullet catching device and fires it and test fires it at the Walther factory. So the people from the proof house at Ulm drive to the Walther factory to go inspect those firearms. The people at the proof house in Cologne drive to the Umarex factory to go and to prove those rifles and those firearms at the Umarex factory. On the IWI, you see the shield with the 3 crowns. On the G36, you see the shield with the 3 crowns. And on the Beretta ARX, you see the shield with the 3 crowns. So what does that proof mark mean? The proof mark of the crown with 3 shields. It means that these 4 rifles were put together at Umarex's Arnsberg factory, and an employee from the proof house in Cologne drove to Arnsberg and inspected and proofed these rifles in Arnsberg. What I did not know about proof marks is a proof mark doesn't necessarily indicate where the individual parts were manufactured. The proof mark indicates where that part was proofed. So some of these parts could have been made in Ulm by Walther, and then they could have shipped those up to the Umarex factory in Arnsberg, and then Umarex assembled them at the factory in Arnsberg, and then have them proofed there, and then they would have the Cologne proof house mark. And that is a possibility, although I don't think it's very likely. More likely than not, these rifles are made directly by Umarex, which makes sense. I mean, that's what Umarex does. Umarex is in the business of making replicas, and they make good replicas. And that's what we have here are these replicas. Probably nearly certainly these rifles are made solely by Umarex. Okay, and one last thing that kind of puts a nail in the coffin on this is on that Walther forums, they had a series going on. I don't know if they're still doing it or not, but they had an actual representative from Walther. And on this particular time, they had this Mark Thomas, who was the director of marketing for Walther Arms. This happened on Tuesday, March 26th of 2013. This Mark Thomas, director of marketing for Walther Arms, was answering a question, and I printed out his post here, and he says, "We make all centerfire pistols in Ulm, Germany." So PPQ, P99, AS, and C, PPX, PPS, etc. In Arnsberg, Germany, we make all the PK380s, but primarily rimfire guns, so P22, and the tactical rimfire replicas for Colt, H&K, and Uzi. Smith & Wesson still makes the PPK and PPK-S due to the 1968 gun laws, so we can't import those. So this guy from Walther himself said that these replicas are made in Arnsberg, along with the PK380s and the P22s. Now, in some of the posts that I saw, some people had some PPK380s who had the Ulm proof mark, had that stag, that antler. And so those were probably some of the earlier ones that were built. I think even some of the P22s, some people said that it had the antler on it, the Ulm True Walther proof house mark on it as well. And this, again, is not 100% because it's possible that Walther makes some of these parts and ships them up to Umarex. But if you want to have a pretty good idea about whether Umarex made your firearm or if Walther did, is look at that proof mark. If it has the antler, then it was probably made truly by Walther. If it has the shield with 3 crowns, it probably was made by Umarex. Now, with all of that said, I'm not saying that these are bad quality rifles. They're very nice. And I've shot a lot of rounds through these, but I've seen people on other forums who have shot way more rounds through these, and they've held up to abuse, and that they are very good, high-quality rifles, even though very likely they are made by Umarex. I love these rifles. I'm glad they're in my collection. I'm not getting rid of them. I enjoy them. That's what I found out about the relationship between Walther and Umarex. I hope that some of this information has helped you. Thanks for watching today.